There is a specific kind of loyalty that nobody asks for. Not the loud kind, not the kind you announce at dinner tables or post on the internet. The quiet kind, the kind where you just keep showing up without telling anyone, without keeping score, without needing the person who should notice to actually notice. I have spent 67 years believing that what a man does when no one is watching is the only real measure of who he is. What a man does when the person who should be watching has already decided not to, that tells you everything else, everything that matters. My name is Frank Colton. I'm 67 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a house I bought in 1994 with more ambition than money, a back porch it took me 4 summers to build correctly, and a driveway that has seen every version of my adult life roll in and out of it. I spent 31 years in project management, government contracts, federal infrastructure, the kind of work that takes years, never get applauded, and fails very visibly when someone cuts a corner. I retired at 63. I coach a junior design program at the community college on Tuesday mornings. Volunteer work, the kind of thing that keeps a man from becoming the person at the hardware store who talks too long about weather. I drive a 2007 Ford F-150, dark green, 190,000 miles, and every single one of them earned. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Let me back up. My wife's name is Diane. Diane Colton, née Sherwood. We have been married 22 years. She is organized, capable, and the kind of woman who knows exactly what she wants without spending much time apologizing for it. I don't say that with particular bitterness, because it is simply accurate. She is good at her work. She is good at the life she has constructed. She is, in certain specific circumstances, involving the people who most need her, considerably less good at showing up. That is the honest summary of 22 years, and I have spent most of them telling myself it wasn't as large a pattern as it looked. Her father's name is Raymond Sherwood, 78 years old as of March 14th. Retired civil engineer, 40 years with the county. He designed 3 bridges in the Tampa Bay area that are still standing, and he will tell you their names if you give him 30 seconds and a reason. He lives alone in Clearwater, Florida, in the house where Diane grew up. Small place, good bones, a kitchen with yellow curtains her mother chose in 1988 that Raymond has never once considered replacing. He is a man who values continuity. He mows his own lawn. He reads the actual newspaper every morning at 6:15 a.m., same chair, same mug. The one that says world's okayest fisherman that Diane gave him as a joke when she was 17, before things between them went sideways. The falling out that produced the block number was not a single event. That is the honest answer. It was a long accumulation of small withdrawals, missed holidays, unreturned calls. A Christmas 5 years ago where Raymond drove up to Charlotte expecting to stay the week and was gone by noon on the 26th. Citing a scheduling conflict Diane had discovered that morning. I was standing in the kitchen when she told him. I watched Raymond put his hat on, pick up his bag, shake my hand at the door. He didn't make a scene. He didn't raise his voice. He just nodded slowly, the way a man does when he is filing something under permanent rather than temporary. That was the last time he tried to visit. I need you to understand who Raymond Sherwood is, because nothing that follows makes sense without that foundation. He is not a saint. He was not a perfect father. Diane's version of their history has chapters one was not present for, and I am not here to adjudicate 50 years of a relationship I only entered at the back end. What I can tell you is the man I drove to Clearwater to see, the man who had the coffee already made by the time I pulled in at 10:30 on a Saturday morning, who never once asked why I kept coming back, who could watch 3 full innings in comfortable silence before either of us said anything worth saying, who, when I asked him once whether he wanted me to try talking to Diane about the distance between them, looked at me for a long, measured moment and said, "Frank, you don't fix a bridge by apologizing to the river." That is Raymond Sherwood. That is who I drove 4 hours round trip to see every other weekend for 4 years. Not because anyone asked me to, not because it made anything easier at home, because someone had to and I was someone. The diagnosis came on a Thursday in September, 2 years into the visits. He called me directly. Not Diane. Me. Frank. His voice was steady, the way it always was. I want to tell you something before it gets complicated. The doctors found a mass. Left lung. They want to do a biopsy next Friday, but the imaging already has a particular look to it. And Dr. Carl Simone, my pulmonologist, good man, takes his time with you. He didn't offer me much runway before the word. I was sitting in the driveway at 6:44 p.m., engine still running, when he called. I remember the street light coming on over the mailbox. I remember the neighbor's dog barking twice and going quiet. Raymond, I said, I'm coming down this weekend. You don't need to do that. I know I don't need to. I said I'm coming. A short pause. The kind between men who understand each other. All right, Frank, I'll put the coffee on. I sat in the truck for 4 more minutes after we hung up, not to collect myself. I am not a man who needs a long runway for difficult news. I needed to think through the exact right way to tell Diane. That was a calculation. Not whether to go. That was settled before he finished his second sentence. But how to say it in a way that didn't open a 2-hour conversation about the Sherwood family history, going back to things I wasn't there for. I came inside. She was at the kitchen table, laptop open, glass of wine, the news on low in the background. Diane, I said, your father called me this afternoon. Raymond has lung cancer. She looked up. Her face moved through several things quickly. I saw them. I didn't comment on them. He called you? Yes. She set her wine glass down. Carefully. How bad? Don't know yet. Biopsy next Friday. I'm going down this weekend. A silence. Not the short kind. You don't have to do that. Frank. I know, I said. I'm not going. She said it quietly, not cruelly, with the flat certainty of a woman who had made this particular decision before the conversation started and was simply confirming it. He and I are not in a place where that's something I can do right now. I nodded. Okay, I said. That was the whole conversation. I packed a bag Thursday night. Left Friday at 5:30 a.m. and pulled into Raymond's driveway with 2 coffees from the Dunkin' on I-75 at 9:47 a.m. He was sitting on the front porch. Blue flannel shirt, his Cardinals cap, khaki pants pressed because Raymond Sherwood did not own unpressed pants. He stood when I pulled in, walked to the passenger window, looked at the coffees without saying anything. You remembered. He said, finally, 1 sugar. I said, I know. He took the cup, nodded once. Good man. We saw Dr. Carl Simone together the following morning. He was a careful physician, mid-50s, the kind of doctor who lets you finish every question before answering any of them, which in my experience is the only kind worth seeing twice. Stage 2 non-small cell lung carcinoma, left upper lobe. Treatable, he said, not uncomplicated, but treatable. Surgery first, followed by 4 to 6 rounds of adjuvant chemotherapy, depending on response. Raymond listened the way he listened to everything, hands folded, nodding at precise intervals, not performing calm, but actually being it. When Dr. Simone finished, Raymond looked at him evenly and said, I want the honest number, not the optimistic one. Dr. Simone studied him for a moment. Then, 5-year survival for this stage and type, with full treatment, runs 55 to 65%. Raymond nodded once. All right, let's treat it. We were back in Raymond's kitchen by 11:22 a.m. I made sandwiches. He poured the coffee. We sat at the table with the yellow curtains and talked about the Braves for 20 minutes before either of us said another word about any of it. That was October 3rd. Over the following 14 months, I drove to Clearwater 19 times. Surgery in November. First chemo round in January. The hard second round in February. The one that took 11 pounds off him and put the tremor in his hands. I did not brief Diane on the schedule. Not because I was concealing it. If she had asked me anything specific, I would have told her everything. She never asked. She knew her father was sick. She knew I was going. Every few weeks she asked how Raymond was doing, the same tone she used to ask about our neighbor's knee surgery. I answered honestly each time. Tired this week. Better. Holding his own. She never asked if he needed anything. Never asked if I needed anything. Never once suggested she might come. I filed that information carefully, not with anger. I want to be precise about that, because the distinction matters. A man who keeps score out of bitterness uses the information against you. A man who keeps score out of accuracy uses it to understand the actual size of the thing in front of him. I was beginning to understand the size of the thing in front of me, and it was larger than I had been telling myself. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it and drop your thoughts in the comments. The conversation I want to tell you about happened on a Saturday in March, the weekend after Raymond's third chemotherapy round. It had been a rough week. He'd lost 8 pounds since Monday. His hands had the tremor that started after round 2 and hadn't fully settled. He slept in his chair most of the afternoon, the television on low, the Braves losing in the 7th inning, and I sat across from him reading the same 3 pages of the same book without absorbing a word of any of them. Around 4 o'clock, he woke up, looked at the television, looked at me. "You should be home. Frank." "I'm fine," I said. He studied me in a particular way he had, not searching, just seeing. "Frank." He said my name the way men of his generation use names, when they're about to say something that counts. "How long have you been making this drive without her?" I set the book down. "For years, give or take." He was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his hands resting on the armrest of the chair. "Does she know how often?" "She knows I come." That's not what I asked. I looked at him. "I think she knows the shape of it. I don't think she's examined the details." He nodded slowly, looked back toward the television, though I don't think he was seeing it. "I spent 18 years, he said, wondering what I'd done wrong, what year it turned, what I could have said differently." He picked up his coffee mug, held it without drinking. "Last year I stopped wondering." He paused. "You get tired of apologizing to the river." Something in me settled into a quiet right then. Not a dramatic shift. Not a snap or a break. Just a door closing somewhere interior, gently, without force. Because I recognized in what he said not just his own story, but something about mine. Something I had been not quite naming for a long time. "Raymond," I said, "did something happen recently? Something specific?" He looked at me over the mug, clear-eyed, steadier than a man 6 days out his third chemo round had any business being. "I called Louise Hartley last week," he said. "She's been my estate attorney for 11 years. Handled Margaret's trust when she passed. Sharp woman, Louise. Doesn't waste your time." He set the mug down on the side table. "I have some changes I want to make. To the will, to the property documents, to the beneficiary designations on the accounts." He paused. "Several changes. And I'd like you present when I sit down with her, Frank, not as a beneficiary, as a witness, someone who knows the whole picture." I held his gaze for a moment. "Whatever you need, Raymond," I said. He nodded. "Single, quiet, final." "Good. I've made the appointment for Tuesday the 14th, 10 a.m., her office on Pinellas Avenue." I drove home Sunday evening. For hours and 9 minutes on I-75 North, the Charlotte skyline rising out of the dark just past 9 p.m. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a few minutes with the engine off and the windows down. The porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see the blue flicker of whatever Diane was watching, her silhouette on the couch, the ordinary geometry of a Sunday night at home. I thought about Raymond at that kitchen table, about the 18 years of wondering and the 1 year of letting go, about Louise Hartley's office on a Tuesday morning I had not yet rearranged anything to attend, about a man who had designed 3 bridges that were still standing and never once asked me to come back, but always had the coffee ready when I did. The porch light buzzed faintly. A car passed at the end of the block. The oak in the front yard dropped something onto the hood. I got out of the truck, went inside. Diane looked up from the couch. "How is he?" "Tired," I said, "but steady." "That's good," she said, and looked back at the television. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stood at the window over the sink, and looked out at the backyard in the dark. The porch I built over 4 summers. The garden she planted 2 years ago that I watered every evening that fall. The fence I replaced board by board in 2019, because I don't do things halfway when I can do them right. Some things last because they're tended, I thought. Some things don't because they aren't. I went upstairs, set my alarm for 5:30. Tuesday was 3 days away, and I had a 4-hour drive to make. E&D Part 1, 3, 180 words. Acts 1 to 4 complete. Pace Part 2, prompt to continue. Part 2, Acts 5 to 7. I called Gordon Marsh Monday morning at 7:15. Gordon is my oldest friend in Charlotte. We came up together through the same contracting firm in the early 90s. Him in legal compliance, me in project management. Two men who spent years learning how institutions actually work rather than how they're supposed to. He retired 4 years before I did, spends his mornings fishing badly, and his afternoons reading everything. He is the kind of man who asks one careful question instead of 10 careless ones, and waits for the real answer. Gordon, I said when he picked up, I need a half hour of your time today. Not a favor. Just your eyes on something. He said, noon. My porch. I was there at 11:58. I told him everything, from the block number, to the Christmas Raymond drove home early, to the diagnosis, to the 19 drives, to the Saturday conversation in the recliner, to Louise Hartley's office on Tuesday morning. Gordon listened the way he always listened. Entirely still, coffee in hand, not interrupting once. When I finished, he was quiet for a full 30 seconds. Then, does Diane know about Tuesday? No. Does she know her father is revising his estate? No. He looked at his coffee. Then at me. Frank. He paused. What is Raymond's estate, roughly? If you know, I know some of it. The house in Clearwater he owns outright. Paid off in 2007. Margaret's life insurance went into a joint account that's been sitting untouched. He's mentioned a brokerage account, modest. 30 years of careful contributions. The 1971 Chevelle in the garage, he restored himself over 5 years. And the property at Cedar Key, small parcel, waterfront, that's been in the Sherwood family since 1963. Gordon was quiet again. Then, and Diane is currently in the will. She was, I said, as of the last time it was written. Margaret's trust passed Diane directly when she passed. The rest, I assume, was structured the same way. That's what Louise Hartley is revising. Gordon nodded slowly. He set his coffee down. You understand that when the estate settles differently than she expects, this is not a conversation. This is a reckoning. I know, and you're not going to warn her. I looked at him steadily. Raymond is 78 years old. He has stage 2 lung cancer. He has spent 4 years with a block number where his daughter's name used to be. He has the legal right and the full moral standing to leave his life's work to whoever showed up for it. He doesn't need my permission, and he doesn't need my warning. Gordon was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee again. All right, he said. What do you need from me? Nothing specific. I said, I just needed to say out loud to someone who understood the weight of it before I drove down there tomorrow. He nodded. He understood. That is the thing about a 30-year friendship. Sometimes you don't need advice. You need a witness. Someone who will remember later that you thought this through. I left Gordon's porch at 12:48 p.m., drove home, packed a bag, checked the oil on the F, 150 the way I always did before a long run. Set out at 5:20 Tuesday morning. The road to Clearwater was quiet that hour. Just the interstate in the dark and the radio on low. Something old playing that I didn't try to name. I drank my coffee from the thermos I'd filled before I left. Let the drive be what it always was. 4 hours of honest thinking with no audience and no interruption. I pulled into Raymond's driveway at 9:31 a.m. He was already on the porch, dressed. Charcoal trousers, a navy button-down, his good shoes. He had his folder in his lap. A manila envelope. Wore at the corners. The kind a man keeps for years because it holds things that matter. You're early, he said. Road was clear, I said. He stood up. Let's get some coffee before we go. We sat at the kitchen table for 22 minutes. He had a soft-boiled egg and 2 pieces of toast, methodical. The same breakfast he'd eaten every weekday for the last 40 years. I had the coffee, which was perfect, which it always was. We didn't talk about where we were going. We talked about the Chevelle. He'd had the carburetor looked at last month. The man at the shop said it was fine. Raymond wasn't entirely convinced. We talked about a book he was reading, a history of the Panama Canal that he said was either the best thing he'd read in 10 years or the most boring. He hadn't decided yet. We talked the way men talk when they're giving each other space before something significant. At 9:53, he set his mug down, folded his napkin, picked up the envelope. "Ready," he said. Louise Hartley's office was on Pinellas Avenue, third floor of a building that had been there since the 1970s, and looked like it knew that and was proud of it. Dark in the reception area. Framed diplomas going back further than most people's careers. The specific hush of an office where serious things get resolved without drama. The receptionist, a composed woman named Evelyn, had us seated and offered coffee within 2 minutes. We both declined. Raymond sat with the envelope on his knee, perfectly still, the way he always was when he was completely decided about something. Louise Hartley came in at 10:01. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of attorney who has seen enough human error to be unsurprisable and enough human decency to still be glad she does the work. She shook Raymond's hand, then mine, then sat down across from us and opened her own folder without preamble. "Raymond," she said, "you told me on the phone you had specific changes in mind. Why don't you walk me through them?" He opened his envelope. He had a handwritten list inside, neat columns, each item numbered. I recognized his engineering habit. Problem solved in sequence, nothing left ambiguous. He walked her through it methodically. The house on Mariner Street. He had it appraised in February. $387,000, current market. He wanted it placed in a revocable trust with instructions for sale upon his passing. The proceeds directed in full to a single named beneficiary. He named me. He stated it plainly, without ceremony. Frank Colton, my son-in-law. He was the one who showed up. Louise wrote without looking up. The brokerage account, $214,000, current balance. Give or take market movement, same beneficiary, same structure. The Cedar Key parcel waterfront, 1.3 acres. Family land since 1963. Assessed at $178,000, to be held in trust and passed to me with a right of refusal to sell for 10 years, honoring the land's history. The Chevelle. He paused on this one. It was the only moment he paused. The 1971 Chevelle SS, fully restored, currently garaged on Mariner Street. To Frank Colton, he said, because he's the only one who ever asked about it like he meant it. Louise looked up at that one, just for a moment, then she wrote it down. Margaret's life insurance remainder, $43,200, sitting in a joint account since 2019, to the Clearwater Animal Shelter on Gulf to Bay Boulevard, where Margaret had volunteered every third Saturday for 14 years. Because that, Raymond said quietly, is where she would have put it. Louise set her pen down. She looked at Raymond for a moment, then at me, then back at Raymond. "Raymond," she said carefully, "I want to make sure the record is clean. Your daughter Diane Sherwood Colton is currently named as primary beneficiary across all of these instruments." "Yes," he said. "And you are removing her entirely." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "I'll need you confirm on record that this is being done of your own free will, without coercion, with full understanding of the legal implications." Raymond looked at her steadily. "Louise," he said, "I designed load-bearing infrastructure for 40 years. I understand what a foundation is, and what happens when you build on one that isn't sound." He paused. "This is not a decision I made this week." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once, the way professionals nod when they have heard enough to be satisfied. "We'll have the documents drafted by end of week." She said, "I'll need you back to sign and notarize. Can you do Friday?" "Friday works," he said. She looked at me. "Mr. Colton, I'll need your signature on the trust instruments as accepting beneficiary." "Friday as well?" "I'll be here," I said. She closed her folder, stood, shook Raymond's hand first, then mine. Her grip was firm and brief, the handshake of a woman who respected time. "Raymond," she said, "for what it's worth, and I say this outside of any professional capacity, I've been doing this for 31 years. The people who sit in that chair and do what you're doing today are almost always right." Raymond picked up his envelope, put his list back inside, folded the flap down with the same precise care he'd used opening it. "I know," he said simply. "That's why it took me this long." We were back in the truck at 11:14 a.m. Raymond sat in the passenger seat with the envelope on his knee, looking out at Pinellas Avenue in the Tuesday morning light. I started the engine, Let it warm up. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then Raymond said, quietly, "You hungry?" "I could eat," I said. "There's a place on Cleveland Street," he said. "Does a good grouper sandwich. Been there since 1987. I put it in drive. Lead the way. We ate at a table by the window. The grouper was excellent. Raymond had sweet tea and half of a slice of key lime pie, and I watched him eat with more appetite than I'd seen from him in 4 months, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, sitting across from the people I loved. Simple gratitude. The uncomplicated kind. Just this. Just 2 men, and a good meal, and the right thing done. I got him home at 1:30, walked him inside, checked the refrigerator the way I always did on my way out. Made sure the next 2 days of meals were covered. He stood in the kitchen doorway watching me with his arms crossed and an expression that was not quite amusement but was close to it. "You know I've been feeding myself for 50 years, he said. "I know," I said. "How'd the carburetor sound on the drive over?" He considered it. "Better than I expected. I'll look at it Friday when I'm back for the signing." He nodded. Then, quietly, in the way he said the things that mattered, "Frank," I looked at him. "Thank you. Not just for today." He paused. "For all of it." I held his gaze for a moment. I thought about the first drive down, for years ago, before the diagnosis, before any of this. Just a Saturday morning because someone needed to come, and I was someone. I thought about the 19 hospital drives and the coffee always already made, and the baseball games in comfortable silence, and the phrase, "You don't fix a bridge by apologizing to the river," and everything that had taken me too long to apply to my own life. "Raymond," I said, "thank you for leaving the light on." He pressed his lips together, nodded once. Then he turned back toward the kitchen. "Coffee for the road?" he said. "1 sugar," I said. "I know." I was back in Charlotte by 5:48 p.m., pulled into the driveway, sat for 3 minutes. The porch light was already on, though it wasn't fully dark yet. Through the front window, the shape of Diane at the kitchen table, laptop open, the ordinary posture of a woman who did not know that this Tuesday was different from any other Tuesday. She didn't know yet. She would. When Louise Hartley filed the updated documents and the legal process moved the way legal processes do, quietly, correctly, with no drama and no speeches and no scenes at kitchen tables, I thought about what I would say when she asked. I had thought about it on the drive home, the full 4 hours, and I had arrived at almost nothing, not because I didn't have words, but because I understood finally that words were not what the situation required. Raymond had made his decisions. I had made mine, years ago in a driveway at 5:30 a.m. with a thermos of coffee and 4 hours of highway ahead of me. Diane had made hers. Decisions are not arguments. They don't require defense. They only require follow-through. I got out of the truck, went inside. She looked up. "How was the drive?" "Good," I said. "Road was clear." She nodded, looked back at her laptop. "Is he okay?" "He's steady," I said. We had lunch. Grouper sandwich on Cleveland Street. Been there since 1987. She almost smiled. "That sounds like him." "It does," I said. "It really does." I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stood at the window over the sink one more time, looking out at the backyard going blue in the early evening. The porch I built over 4 summers. The oak that was old before we got here. The fence I replaced board by board because I don't do anything halfway when I can do it right. A man's life is not what he says he values. It is what he drives 4 hours in the dark to protect. Friday I would be back in Clearwater. Louise Hartley would have the documents ready. Raymond would sign his name in his precise engineer's hand, and I would sign mine, and Eva at the front desk would notarize the whole stack, and the thing would be done the way right things get done, without applause, without audience, without a single word said to the person who would feel it most until the paperwork made it real. Some legacies are written in stone. Some are written in the mile markers between Charlotte and Clearwater on a Tuesday morning, when the road is clear and the coffee is still hot, and a man knows exactly where he's going and exactly why. That is the only kind worth leaving. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dad's Raw Revenge. I will see you on the next one.